Hello, welcome. I know some of you. I recognize some of you are my were my students, and some of you are just fresh faces for me. So nice to be here. Is this working? Good. I wasn't exactly sure how to prepare for this session. I asked some people what kind of questions you guys had on your mind, so I just didn't get up here and just talk at you. Don't touch the button. Okay, I will not touch the button. This here. And there were a number of questions about ethics, and I wanted to center some of the talks, or just center some of my remarks on that, but I want to leave plenty of time for whatever questions you have. We're going to have a Q&A panel later on too, so just feel free to ask. And I will read a little bit from my phone, put up a little bit of a millennial here, but that's just because I have a quote here that I want to read. So in our 1959 interview with Mike Wallace, how many of you guys have seen that, the Mike Wallace interview? Yeah, this is like impactful, right? If you haven't seen it, you should see it. It's a 1959 interview with Mike Wallace. He's a very good interviewer, and this was done like 2 years after Atlas Shrugged was published. She's engaging, argument is tight, she's intense, she answers questions like nobody else answers questions, and so it's really awesome. But she says this, quote, because he asks, what is Randism? He's like trying to get her to encapsulate objectivism, and she says this, quote, I am primarily the creator of a new code of morality, which has so far been believed impossible. Namely, a morality not based on faith, not on arbitrary whim, not on emotion, not on arbitrary edict, mystic or social, but on reason. A morality which can be proved by means of logic, which can be demonstrated to be true and necessary. Close quote. And then later in her essay, The Objectivist Ethics, this is like several years later, she writes, quote, what is morality or ethics? It is a code of values to guide man's choices and actions, the choices and actions that determine the purpose and course of his life. Ethics, as a science, deals with discovering and defining such a code. What is surprising about what she's saying? Does anything jump out? And not you, because I talked to you about this earlier. But does anything jump out at you as odd, strange, striking, surprising, weird? Anything? It's a scientific. So for those of you who have not read any of Ayn Rand, or thinking back to yourself before you read any Ayn Rand, would you have ever thought that ethics was a science? I wouldn't have. And maybe you don't now, but maybe there's a question about what that's supposed to mean. But ethics is a science. And what else stands out? So she thinks of ethics as a science. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, yeah. One of the things that stands out firmly is that this is not based on mystical edicts. Mystical sounds a little on the negative side, but that's what it is, mystical edicts. It's not based on religion. It's not based on faith. What's that? Okay. I don't understand the point, though. Oh, that's okay. That's okay. So one is, go ahead. Okay, so it's a practical guide, okay. That there's one, okay, that's important, that there's one code of values that it's universal. So that it's a science. It's not like there's chemistry for Itamar and chemistry for Tal. No, there's chemistry. There's facts that have been discovered, and you have a kind of a systematic body of knowledge that amounts to actual knowledge. And it's not subjective, it's not, yeah, okay, what else? Yeah, it's not based on an appeal to emotion, okay? Something else that stands out to me that yeah. Okay, that it's self-interested. Okay, all of these are right, but Itamar? No, so that doesn't, so that jumps out at me, but not in the way I'm thinking. But yeah, that she primarily thinks of herself as a moralist, and I think that's true. I think she is primarily a moralist. And I think it's what animates her work. It's what animates her concern with man, with man's life, with its requirements, with the social conditions it needs. Yeah, go ahead. Okay, so that's tapping a little bit into what I was thinking about is an additional one. One is she thinks of ethics as a science. Who thinks that? That's interesting. Two, she thinks she's discovered the truth. Yeah, right. It's kind of like how arrogant. Like, who is this lady? Right? Ethics is a science, and I have discovered the truth about this, and it's the universal truth. This is true for all mankind. Mic drop. It's striking. It might be true, it might not be true. You have to think about that. But it's like, I think that's striking. And there's something interesting about the way she approaches the whole subject of ethics. And I think, I'll get one more quote that I won't read because I know it's in my brain. In Atlas Shrugged, in a climactic, let us say, radio address, one of the characters says, "It is true that we're in an age of moral crisis, but what we need to do now is not to return to morality, but to discover it." The hell does that mean? What we need to do is discover morality. We haven't discovered morality, like we don't know what morality is. We might have the wrong morality, but we don't know what morality is. And I think she's not exaggerating. Or rather, I would put it as, there's a sense in which we've discovered we're going around the margins of what morality is. It's something about how to live, it's something about how to behave, but there's something, whatever it is, that she thinks we haven't got at, we haven't identified yet, and in a sense, we don't really have a morality. And I think that and this is going back to you said this is not like a religious perspective, I think that she would say that if you think ethics is a matter of following commands handed down from tradition, you haven't yet discovered the subject of morality. Not that you just have the wrong ideas about it, which she thinks you probably would, but you haven't discovered the subject of morality yet. Again, that's like, okay. Yeah, I'm still like wanting some answers. Go ahead.
I remember that one of the things I learned is that she called it a frozen concept, in the sense that Christianity, Judaism, whatever you want, created a frozen idea of what morality is, and we equate the subject with a specific type of. We're equating morality as a field with a specific morality. So we have frozen the idea of morality as a field to the Christian morality, which is an edict. So in a way, we have frozen the ability of people to think about ethics as a science because we have attributed ethics to what they think ethics is. Do you think that is related to what?
I think it's related in the sense, and this is common, is that, so this notion of a frozen abstraction is where you take like a wide abstraction and you take one concrete as basically a replacement for it. So I think often people think of morality and they equate it with altruism. And so when you mean morality, they think, yeah, sure, altruism. And we talk about, no, I mean a morality of selfishness. Like, what? That's not morality. That's something, I guess, something else, right? But there's a sense in which if you have a frozen abstraction like that, there's a sense in which you don't have the abstraction. It's not like your abstraction is frozen. This is a metaphor. It's just that you have a concrete, not the wider abstraction. So if philosophy means objectivism, you don't yet have philosophy. If you know that there are other worldviews, and this is one of them, and you're integrating these, that's one. So that's one aspect of it. But I think, so what is it she thinks we haven't discovered that would let us enter the field of morality, to actually discover the field of morality, and for the first time be able to have a fact-based morality? And in part, we're not really fundamentally asking the right questions. We're not getting at the question of what are values and why does man need them? And this is, I think, asking those questions is sort of your entryway into the way she thinks about ethics. And because it gets you asking questions about, so ethics has to do with values. It has to do with the kinds of things that we go after. the way we think we should conduct ourselves in life. Why do we need to have any answers to those questions at all? Why do we need to be coherent in our actions? Because we're objectivists. Yes, I'm done. No, I think it's partly is, why do you need any kind of guidance whatever in life? Because you need to make choices in order to, or more broadly, okay, to live, but okay, more specifically, it's because you make choices so you can take action, so you can achieve goals. If you're not after any kind of goals, if there's nothing that you're after, there's nothing you're trying to gain, there's nothing you're trying to keep, there's nothing you're trying to hang on to, you don't need any guidance. If I tell you, turn right, that's not guidance unless you're trying to get to the pizza shop and the pizza shop's over there, and then, that's guidance. It's guidance toward a goal. That's what guidance is. It's guidance toward a goal. It's telling you these are the steps you need to take, this is the action you need to take if you're going to reach this kind of goal. And so Ayn Rand's view is, so the whole issue of values are, what are our goals? What are the ends that we're trying to seek? Do we need to seek any kind of ends? And if so, why? And her answer to this is, it's because we're living organisms. So this is a fundamental, like a metaphysical fact, if you want to think of it just about man's nature as such. You could look at it as a biological fact, but it's the same thing from two different perspectives. You can, as a scientific fact. I mean, just like you could talk to your biology professor, that yes, man is alive, and yes, a human being has certain specific kinds of needs for it to remain in existence, and if it doesn't meet those needs, it dies. Its chemical elements remain, but its life goes out of existence. So it's the fundamental fact, and this is not like a subjective fact or a personal preference or something like that. It's human beings are living organisms. They face a fundamental alternative of life and death. In order to remain alive, they need to take certain specific kind of actions that are dictated by their nature, at least at a fundamental level, are dictated by their nature, and they need to know what those are, and then they need to go actively pursue those kind of things. And so she sees ethics as it's guiding your choices toward goals that are life-sustaining. And the only reason why you need to even enter the field of thinking about values at all is because you're a living organism and you need to meet certain kind of conditions. You need to take certain kind of actions. You need to function in a certain kind of way. And I'd say a little bit more about that. But another point about this issue of ethics as a science, I think we need to say, what is a science? I think we too often tend to think of the sciences as the hard physical sciences, and you have a lab and some telescopes and some beakers and things like that, and that's what a science is. And like ethics is kind of what I want to. Yeah. Okay, so there's something about a method that needs to be followed if it's to count as science, and I think that's right. Yeah, and I would put it as, I have to think about this, is a bit of a mouthful or an earful, but I think a science is a systematic body of knowledge that identifies fundamental principles about some aspect of reality that's arrived at by observation and logical inference. And I think all those elements need to be there. And I think all those elements can be there for ethics. It's a systematic body of knowledge. It's not just a collection of facts that one gathers about, people. Systematic implies that there's something hierarchical about the knowledge, that there's a kind of a base, that you've got some fundamentals, other things are derivative, and they're interconnected, not just sort of a grab bag of facts. Jonathan likes pizza. He likes to drive cars fast. Hopefully he doesn't wreck. But that would probably be bad for him. Just collecting a bunch of stuff. It's not that. So it's systematic. It's a body of knowledge. What Ayn Rand thinks that you get from a proper approach to ethics is you come away with moral knowledge. Not moral views, not moral opinions, but knowledge. And that means something. It's knowledge. There are moral truths, there are moral facts, and there's a way to discover them and to identify them as facts. Go ahead.
I think that there is a misunderstanding about ethics because science is something that you go and study. So I study chemistry at Tel Aviv University, okay, for many years. And now I know that I'm a chemist and I have some knowledge. But when I started, I didn't have any background, so I didn't say I'm going to, I said I'm going to become a chemist, but I didn't know anything before. But when you start asking questions about ethics, somehow your education from your childhood starts to influence. So it's something that you grow into it, and eventually when you start to ask questions, then you come to the conclusion that it's most of the tough things that there ever been.
Yeah, I agree.
Because it's not something that you can do experiments.
I think you can, but it's not the same kind of thing that you would do.
You know what kind of experiments I'm talking about? Not that kind of experiment with scientific instruments.
Yeah.
It's something that you need to do with yourself, with your mind, first of all with yourself, then with others, then to learn the history, then to use the knowledge about previously ethics or attitudes towards life, and then afterward come, and I think that's what Ayn Rand said, because she was very influenced by what happened in Russia when she was relatively young. And she was how to say it, נרדפה? She was persecuted by the communism. And then she came to the conclusion that something wrong with this ideology.
Yeah.
So I think that ethics, in a way, is somehow related. I don't know exactly how, but I think that ethics is somehow related to ideology. It starts with the ethics, and then it goes to the ideology. It's like that science is previously to
there's a lot there. Let me
technology.
Okay, let me get a couple of those. One is I think one of the differences that you pointed out is you go to college and you go study geophysics or something. It's not you're not 6 years old and you got your mom's telling you about geophysics and you just come up with the views. I think by the time you start asking questions that are about ethics, about life, about what's right and wrong, good and evil, there's a sense in which you've already been, what's the word, acclimated, taught, sort of brought up into having certain kind of views. So you don't start blank. You start blank as a kid, but not when you start thinking about ethics. But I don't think it takes very long to start raising those kinds of questions. I think the difficulty is to think that there are answers and that you would know how to arrive at them. So, I mean, I assume that when all of you were middle school, I don't know what you got schools here, teenager, preteen, you probably already disagreed with some things that your parents told you about good and evil, right and wrong. I know I did. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you did later. But these are the kinds of things that you start to come to question. But I think what's harder to do is particularly for a young person, but I think it's true of most people. How the hell are you going to come up with answers to those questions which you know to be true? And I don't think people have the confidence of that because they wouldn't know where to start. And this is why you get this question all the time: is how can you have absolutes in morality without God? And in a way, it's another way of looking at you haven't discovered the subject yet. But there's a way in which they're looking for something, they're gesturing towards some notion of objectivity. Like, it can't just be whatever I want or whatever he wants or whatever mom said. Like, there's something that doesn't seem right. It can't be just that, right? Or at least they don't want it to be that. There have to be actual answers. But they don't know, how do you get the the answers, not like some answers. I can get some answers at the street corner. I don't need that. I want the answers. And I think there just has to be some one divine lawgiver who I guess just knows everything and just hands it down, because how else would you get it? Now, if you have that perspective, that's another way of thinking, how can ethics be a science? Like, how can you find answers if you don't just have some kind of lawgiver giving it to you? And I think part of it is, You have to come to identify the fundamental fact that gives rise to the whole field of values, that gives rise to the whole need to be concerned with something is for me, against me, something is choice-worthy or not choice-worthy, and why would that be, and what standard would it be? And so I think that way of looking at ethics, I think, matters a lot. And if you just look at some of the kind of things, you can probably come up with your own list of these. Some of the kind of metaphysical facts that underlie, some of the facts about the nature of reality, some of the facts about the nature of man, that would underlie a perspective on moral theory if you're trying to approach this as a science. Life has specific conditions. That's one of them. Take something more higher level. Reason is your means of survival. That's a principle. I mean, if it's true, I mean, Rand thinks it's true, but reason is your means of survival. And so if that's a fundamental fact about human beings, what's the guidance that then flows out of that from objectivism? It's so this is not an ethical point. Reason is your means of survival. Reason is your means of knowledge. That's a metaphysical point. That's just a fact about man's nature. But the guidance flowing out of that from objectivism is embrace your means of knowledge. Embrace your means of survival. Embrace it as an absolute. This is how you live. This is how you function. This is how you reach truth. This is how you come to understand things. This is how you come to figure out what your life requires and what methods to follow. Like, that's your tool. So, you have to take that as an absolute. Yeah, you had a question? Sounds good. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Years of every human being's life, our survival mainly depends on our social connection. When you're an infant,
Parents or whichever. Yeah.
Yeah, and 16 years is at the very least is a very long time. So to only say that survival reason is our main means of survival, don't you think that it sort of undervalues or overlooks the significance of social connections to survival?
No, I think what it does is it puts it into context. So if your parents are taking the steps that are required to support you and to make sure that you get what you need, reason is your means of survival. It's just it's not your personal reason that you're using. It's your parents using reason to support you. Same thing if you're in a coma. Reason is your means of survival. True, it's not your personal reason because you can't function right now, but it's somebody's reason. In terms of the life support machines, it's the medical technology, it's your nurse's attendant. Yeah,
of course, but there's a lot more than just the physical aspects of, like you're getting food, you're getting, shelter.
Right.
There's a lot more than that. For a human being, you need love. You need love.
Like psychological needs.
Yes, in order to grow up and be able to even function and think. Your parents need to love you. There needs to be a secure bond. There's a lot of emotional needs. And so I'm not sure exactly how to make my question accurate. But to say that our means of survival are purely reason, to me, overlooks like a whole world of needs and requirements where, parents need guidance, children or teenagers need guidance, which our survival also depends on.
Yeah, I don't think these are exactly at odds. That social connections, other people, the value you get out of that, and the life-sustaining value you get out of that. I don't think it's exactly at odds with the point that reason is man's means of survival. But I think the point that you were raising is man has an array of psychological needs, and I think you can get pretty messed up in childhood, depending on what your experiences are, what your parents are. So there are conditions for a healthy psychology. And I think one of them is, oddly enough, this wasn't the point I was going to make, but oddly enough, it's the degree of rationality of the people around you. And I don't mean that they're like surgeons or something like that. I mean like the context that you come up with. I mean, it's like irrational parents, erratic people around you, no sense of stability. A lot of that's coming from you're getting an irrational environment that you're growing up with. but it's not only that, but I think that's, because you mentioned love, because often what a child will do is it'll internalize a kind of sense of its own value in relation to that, and you can have psychological problems. But even if that were, I don't think there's a conflict there. I think both, because you can recognize that both of these things are needed.
Yeah, of course, but
I think one's fundamental though.
I mean, you could have a very smart, very rational parent that's still going to be a bad parent and not going to do a good job raising a child, because there are emotional needs that a child has. It's not just to teach them the right ideas. And the second thing, I wasn't saying that there's a conflict between the two. I'm just saying that objectivism only says that reason is man's means of survival, but I'm saying there's something missing there, because reason alone is not going to make human beings survive. There's a whole aspect of social relationships and emotions that seems to be missing. So that's the point I'm bringing up.
Okay, or integrated with that. So yeah.
Yes.
Just want to say two things. One, have you ever heard about Rand's childhood? Like, it doesn't sound very loving to me, and she was still able to not only survive, but to produce the novels and philosophy that we are all sitting in the room for it. So we can debate on how important it is to love a child in order for him to flourish. But I think the more fundamental point is that, you need also food in order to survive, and you need to breathe. Why objectivism doesn't talk about breathing? Why objectivism doesn't talk about eating healthy? Why objectivism doesn't talk about exercise? Why men have a wide range of needs, and the idea is that reason is the faculty by which men first identify that he needs them. Like, I need to identify, when I feel this, I need food. And if I want eat food, I will start to be weak. And if people don't eat food at all, they die. And maybe the same thing happens with breathing or with social interactions. And one last thing is that I think that Rand would say that love is part of reason. Love is something born out of reason. She doesn't accept the dichotomy between reason and emotions as if they are two distinct faculties that are unrelated to each other and maybe even work against each other.
Yeah. And I'll say one more thing, is that just on this issue, she also says that reason is man's basic means of survival. Doesn't say that it's his only means of survival. So I think that's at least relevant. If she adds that it's his basic means, it's like, it's not the only thing, but it's what's fundamental. And one could disagree with that. One could think, no, I don't think that's, closer to here. Okay, sorry, thanks. Tal.
I want to go back to the point that the person was making about the nature of the introspective aspect of ethics or philosophy at large versus the material sciences. In the sense that if I'm a chemist and I go into a lab, if I'm a chemist and I go into a lab, the subject of the matter that I'm studying is external to me. Those are the chemicals. I can see what they're doing. I see how they affect. It's very visible to me, and for me, it's kind of the easy ones. We always think about physics and chemistry as like the tough sciences, but the real tough sciences are the philosophical ones, because I think what he was alluding to is like, you can't see it. So what do you think about the introspective nature of the science, and how does it make it more easy or hard? Or maybe that's the reason why we all think about it as a subjective science, in the sense like I experience it different than you do.
Yeah, I think two things I want to introspection, and does that make it hard? And to go back to a point that the gentleman in the back made, was that, and you alluded to this, but there is a lot of, if you want to call it experimental, I call it observational, empirical evidence that when people live in this kind of context and they live in these kinds of ways, you can see what happens. When they live in these kind of ways, you can see what happens. In political terms, I mean, Ayn Rand was always pointing out, if you want a demonstration of this, compare East Germany to West Germany, East Berlin to West Berlin, or now South Korea to North Korea. If you want like a large scale picture, that's evidence. You don't need to go to a lab. I mean, that's like history and observation of here are people functioning under this kind of system. What happens? But then what you do it for a scientific approach is, yeah, but what's the causal mechanism involved? What's the causality of it involved? Is it just, the Koreans, what are you going to do with them, right? It's like, no, that's not the causality involved in North Korea. It's when you throttle the mind, you throttle progress, you throttle innovation, you throttle, any sort of challenge to existing ideas. You make life miserable because people can't directly pursue their own values. They live by obedience, and you watch what happens to them. They implode sort of from the inside, or like in the Soviet Union, they just turn to vodka and become passive and just, and it's like you can watch that country after country after country where this is a practice. You can see that. That's evidence. So that's true. And when it comes to the introspective issue, I think it makes part of the subject is your own consciousness and part of the subject of the field. So you couldn't, like you said, you can go in the lab and you can look at the things out external to the mind, and that's your subject. But part of the subject of ethics is your consciousness, and it's your consciousness relationship to its goals, to its values, and the feedback mechanism. Do you get, am I happy? I mean, a question that's important to ethics is life worth living? Because if it's not, you don't need ethics. So is life worth living? And what makes it worth living? And a lot of that is thinking about, am I happy in life? You've thought a lot about this kind of thing. It's like, am I happy in life? Am I getting what I want? Is it effing worth it? And if you get to the point where you think it isn't, you're in a lot of trouble existentially in life. People do end their lives, because they are not getting from their life what they want. And that requires introspection. But that's part of the data. That's part of the feedback is I took these things, I did this, and here's what I did, and now I feel like crap, and it's like I'm not happy. And that's a lot of the data is all introspective. But it also opens the door for a lot of confusions because introspection is hard. We can tell ourselves stories, to make it a little not as bad as we might think it to be. And you can delude yourself in various ways, and people do it all the time. And so that adds another layer of difficulty to it. It gives you a window into things that there's no other window onto the introspective information, and it's super important. And yet, it has its own challenges. Yeah.
What would you answer a person who says that happiness is somehow related to the amount of serotonin in your brain? That there's a high all this dedication that increase the concentration of this compound in the brain. So you can look at happiness as the question of chemistry. So what is your answer to this? I'm not saying that I believe.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. What is your answer related to ethics?
Well, there are two questions. Yeah.
What is happiness?
Yeah, there are two.
When there are people who say, well, you can take these pills and you will become happy. You can take the drug and become happy because eventually we have chemicals, but above chemicals, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at that from two ways. I mean, one is what's the causal order of this in terms of regular, not chemically induced stuff, but just in the causal order. If you discover someone who is, I don't know, very happy, they've just achieved something really important to them, they're happy or whatever. Do they have increased serotonin levels in the brain? It's like what generates what drives what's the causality? So is it serotonin levels boost, and then now you're happy, and then somebody says it was your achievement, and you're like, no, it's not the way it works. The serotonin makes you feel better, and then you have some view about yourself, and so there's a question about what drives what in terms of the causality. And then the other question is, and philosophers have thought about this, it's, look, if you want to be happy, just take the serotonin injections. We've just got a clinic down the road, and every couple of weeks you can pop in and get your serotonin injection. You feel great. I feel great now, right? It's like, suppose you could get a same psychological sensation from that. You could. But then you'd have to keep going in artificially to kind of get what was downstream of the achievement or whatever it was that makes you be happy. And you could get a chemical injection to do it. But the idea is you become dependent on something else, not yourself. And so it's like, it's possible, I suppose, What's that?
Which means it's artificial.
Well,
This is an artificial happiness.
Yeah, you could call it that. You could call it that. You know, have you ever heard the pleasure machine? This article. It was a philosophy article. Yeah, Robert Nozick. Yeah, and he asked the people like, if you could just be hooked up to a pleasure machine that would allow you to experience like ARI live courses, to just experience all the things that you're climbing a mountain, you're like, you know, I don't know, whatever, you're doing all these things, and it will allow you to experience these things and like have these things in psychology, just psychologically. But you're strapped in a chair or something like that with, you know, electrodes coming out of you and stuff like that. Like, and you ask people, if you could do that and guarantee that you're going to feel that way, you know, versus you have your own life and whatever it is, you can go in reality go achieve things. Which would you want? And of course, it's a thought experiment. It's not like there's one right answer. But often what you find is, no, I want to actually do things. And that's not like a proof of something, but it's indicative of something. I think, yeah. I'm out of time, but there are probably more times.
You have 4 minutes for questions.
Oh, okay, then go and then go.
It's not a question for you, it's just a comment. You can say, so why don't just be addicted to drugs? Like, it's the same question. Like, you don't want to get the effect. You want to experience the way and the road that gets you to this happiness.
Yes, but you know that in the perspective of the medical profession, they would say that having low amount of serotonin is like having low amount of insulin. It's just a disease.
I can say that.
Happy is a disease. It's a lack of a hormone in your brain.
Well, hold on. Those could be two different issues. I think, yeah. Because I think you're right that there's something about wanting the actual doing. And I think the knowing that you're actually doing it, and this is why you're experiencing this, and experiencing the causal relationship between the two is part of what happiness is. And separately, it could be true that for some people they have lower levels just biologically, chemically, have lower levels, and just they're more flat, perhaps, than other people. That's quite possible, and because it happens with other chemicals too. Oh, okay.
I keep it brief.
Yes, sir.
In Atlas Shrugged, there is a character named James Target.
Yeah.
James Target, the assistant, is the brother of the manager of. Yes, he is a common person without any form of notion of his own, and you see it a lot in regulation.
Well, there's James Taggart, which
Yeah,
is Dagny's brother.
James Taggart,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
So, in the end, New York is destroyed and he's running the company. And can you see something like that in real life today?
Are there in effect, real life Jim Taggart types?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I see more, just in my own sort of own personal experience, I see more Peter Keatings than Jim Taggarts, but that's just empirical, but presumably yes. Go to politics. Yeah, go ahead. Did you have a question?
I just wanted to say that there is a difference because you can speak about the short term or the long term.
Mm-hmm.
And you are looking for happiness for long term.
Mm-hmm.
You are looking for the good for the long term, not for the instant. And that make a great difference.
Yeah, and I think there's a component to happiness which is missed, I think, when it comes to, so Ayn Rand will often describe happiness as a state of consciousness or a psychological state. And I think part of that state is not simply an emotion. I think it's more than an emotion. And I think it's more than or includes more than an emotional state. It's that there's a component to it it's not just like I'm experiencing some positive feeling about my position in the world or something like that, how I'm doing, and there's a value judgment. There's an estimate of myself. I know what I'm doing. I've got this. And I'm worth it. and I know why I feel about myself the way I do, and I know I'm on the right track. So that whatever, kind of like Howard Roark, it's like whatever ups and downs and bumps and disappointments goes, I know I'm functioning by the right way, and I know I'm good. And part of that knowledge of those, part of those judgments about oneself, I think is part of what makes up the psychological state of happiness. So it's not just a jolt of elation or joy, or if somebody could give you a drug to sustain some joyous state without the judgment, because you'd also know, yeah, I didn't do anything, but man, I feel good, you know. And I think that you would lack that sort of estimate of yourself, and I think that is a component.
I want to add, it has to do with your point, and I think there's a premise.
You mean the achievement?
I'm talking about, no.
Somehow related to your way in life, and the way that your happiness is related to what your goals are and how you achieve them.
It is exactly this, but I want to talk about the reason why you asked the question, what is happiness and how you relate to it. If you study truly what it is, it's a state of consciousness, which is what Ayn Rand defines it. What does it mean? It's more like climate and not weather. So today is sunny outside, so I feel good, but tomorrow is going to be rainy. I don't feel good. That's not happiness. Happiness is a long-term, evaluative state that you are in, which is exactly coming from your evaluation of how well do you achieve your goals or your values. The first you define it. What's interesting about the way you think about it, and you are a scientist, right? So there is a materialistic view of happiness, which says, well, it's serotonin. I can look at the brain and tell you if the person is happy. But there's a misconception about the nature of consciousness, which we don't know what it is. Science doesn't know what consciousness is. And if somebody tells you they understand it, they're lying. So there's an unknown aspect of what consciousness is that you and I have right now that no physicist, no chemist, no biologist can explain. And it's wait a second. And it's a nature of that thing. So when you're talking about an aspect of that thing that we don't understand, you cannot assume that it's materialistic. You cannot assume that the essence of what it is this serotonin or whatever it is that it's something that we all experience. You know when you're happy and you know where you're unhappy. And like Aaron said, you should not conflate it with I feel joy right now or pleasure right now. It's a much long term. And like this guy said, Amit, it's more about a long-term view of what it is. So people conflate pleasure. Like I just had a great meal, I'm amazing, right? But then the next thing you remind yourself that you're out of a job and you're miserable. So it's not those jolt of dopamine or whatever you want to call it. So the premise you have to say is like there's a consciousness, which we have no idea what it is, but we can see it in every living moment that you are. It has an effect that we can experience. And if you really go to the nature of what it is, and you listen to a lot of what Ayn Rand has to say about it, you see that there's a whole psychology, which is a field that is, for me, as a nascent field, have no idea what they're doing in psychology, that if you followed Rand's premises, you will come to a completely different way of looking at psychology.
So I'm just saying where that being happy is somehow related to achieving another step in your goal.
The way in which you affect that thing that we call happiness is through the definition and the achievement of your values. How do we experience it? That's something completely different. But I think we're out of time. And the next thing we're going to do is take how long? 10? Maybe close or?
Yeah. At the risk of going forever, the thing about elation, joy, happiness, and other related things, it's very difficult to isolate and define very closely related psychological states, emotional states, and they're often combinations of emotions that come together. That's a tricky thing to do, and it's not at all easy, and it's not at all obvious that elation isn't elation and joy. It's like a spike. It's like that's hard to do. That's hard to do. And so it's not weird that people have sort of different views about that. And the more we come to understand about the body, the more you're going to want to then try to, how do we integrate that with our understanding just as people who are aware of their own psychological states from the inside, so to speak, just introspectively, how do we relate it to that? Do we equate them? Do we identify them? One just is the other, or one drives the other? And that's just, that's difficult stuff, and that's kind of, but it's interesting, and we should be doing that kind of thinking. That's just part of the integration of knowledge. So, yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you. We'll take, okay.
Okay. So we're going to take a break until 4:20.